Hi, and welcome to the Shared Path. I'm Maggie Linton. Today, we're talking with a woman who shares her life experience while asking us to look beyond the color and see a real person. Kimberlee Williams is a Washington, D.C. native who is also an educator, consultant, speaker, and certified life and health coach. Her new book is Dear White Woman, Please Come Home. Hand me your bias, and I'll show you our connection. Welcome, Kimberlee.
Thank you so much for having me, Meg. I'm so grateful to be here.
Oh, listen, it's you've got quite a book, and I'm gonna hold it up because I wrote a page of notes, but all I like to do it is really just a conversation. This is it, folks. Believe me when I tell you. Let's see, believe me when I tell you it's worth viewing. You do, in a sense, this is a memoir too, but at the
hmm
same
hmm
time, it is done in such a unique way. But let's talk about your beginning because Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
as we were saying just before we got started rolling, is really a melting pot. And it's so
Yes.
diverse, yet still has its issues, as does all of America and the world. Talk
Right.
about
Right.
growing up there.
Oh, wow. We called it Chocolate City growing up because Washington, D.C. is divided into, four quadrants. If you've never visited, you should go, I think. And growing up, the two quadrants of the city where most of the people of color were in Northeast and Southeast. And you went to Northwest to visit the museums and the White House and to see other white people. But in the Eastern quadrants of the city, most, again, communities of color. So if you went into Northwest to find people of color, you were on Embassy Row, where there was so much diversity, because there are the embassies from all over the world and the the yummy food from all over the
Oh,
world.
wonderful food.
Um, right? I have to vouch for the food there.
Mhm.
It's definitely unparalleled. And so it was all, you were always around people from all over the world there in Washington, D.C. You never knew what language you were going to hear or what type of music. I mean, it was like you said, it's such a melting pot. People from all over the world live in Washington, DC.
And that really helped shape who you were
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
how you looked at people because you'd been exposed to so much. And
Mm-hmm.
and yet you realized so often you were not being respected because of the color of your skin and how
Yeah.
people addressed you. Uh,
Yeah.
and what a difference that made too in knowing who you were.
Yes. 100%. 100%.
All right, let's go ahead and talk about your journey because it's really, what gave you the idea for the letters? Because we should let people know 40 letters addressed to Dear White Woman.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I started with the idea of the letters. I started writing because I wanted to write directly. I wanted to write directly to white women. It was right after being in a workshop that was designed for Black women and white women to come together and to share and to heal. And it was supposed to be these really deep conversations that couldn't really happen because white women were saying, wait a minute, I didn't even know that Black women and women of color went through that. Like I had no idea. So I couldn't even, how could I care if I didn't have a chance to even know? And so I was like, well then, I went home and I got angry and I said, listen, then I'm going, if all these women are saying the same thing, after the first woman said she didn't know, I was like, well, maybe she's not from this country and that's okay. Like she doesn't know. Fine. She doesn't know the plight of the Black American or the, Black woman in America. And I thought, then the second woman said, and I was like, well, we have a lot of communes in this country. Maybe she was raised in a commune. And then the third woman said, and I said, wait a minute, these women are lying. Like, there's no way that you don't know what we're going through if we're on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and this and that. And so I said, you know what? I'm gonna write a book of letters directly to white women so that they will never again say that they didn't know. And I felt like a letter because in the DEI world, or people say DEIB or DEIJ, there's so many books out there. There's so many, and a lot of them are behind me, but they're so right here. They're up here and they're written to your head. But I feel like when somebody writes you a letter it's like the difference between receiving a bill in the mail and, and a hug in the mail.
Yeah.
I wanted it to feel personal. I wanted to write to the heart of the person, not the mind. I wanted to write to the heart of the person.
Yeah. When you brought that up, they say they don't know. I think
Mm-hmm.
in a sense we have an advantage because we know
Mm-hmm.
our history and we also
Mm-hmm.
know their
Mm-hmm.
history because we're getting
Yes.
shoved down our throat with their history.
Yes.
And it's all American history, but
Yes. Yes.
so often our books are being removed from schools.
Yes.
Our books
Yes.
about where we want to go. And like you said, there's TikTok and things like that. But, I'm of an age where there wasn't that. And it was
Right.
left up
Right.
to my parents, the village that raised me, to
Right.
also
Yes.
help me learn about
Yes.
my history. And so you say
Yes.
you didn't know. Well, part of it is because they just didn't even try.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I and the reason and I think about the fact that our family, like I think about growing up and all of the Black women in my life saying when, out in public, hold your head up. Stop holding your head down. Don't you know why we hold our heads down? And going back into, where it was, where you could get in serious trouble for looking a white person in the eye or in the face, so to bring your head down, they're like, what, walk with your head up. We don't have to hold our head down anymore. And so things like that, it's funny. I will tell you, Maggie, it's funny because sometimes when I'm out and about in the community giving workshops, it shocks some white people when they hear that we were not allowed to look them in the face. They look at me like, what? Did you just make that up?
No.
And I'm like, wait.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I always want to say refer to Emmett Till.
yes, refer to Emmett Till. Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For so many years, there was, and you still run into it nowadays. And
Yes.
now
Mm-hmm.
you're on the West Coast, but
Mm-hmm.
you find people who don't seem to understand, and it's because they've grown up in a white world. So
Mm-hmm.
your book
Mm-hmm.
helps open it up, and it really
Yes.
makes a difference as to what people perceive. Let's talk with
Mm-hmm.
going just mundane things like you talk about getting on an
Mm-hmm.
elevator and seeing people
Mm-hmm.
clutch their purses a little bit more. Talk
Mm-hmm.
about some of those
Mm-hmm.
mundane walk through lives. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think of people going in and out of a grocery store, and I was taught that if somebody's coming out, you hold the door for them, male or female.
Yes.
But
Yes.
a lot of those folks
Yes.
you think that you're supposed to hold that door open for them, right?
Right. Yes. 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 And you're right. It's in those mundane interactions and experiences that we're going about our day. And the stories are just unbelievable. A story that I wish I could have put in the book that's not in there. It's just for me, I am a sunrise worshiper. I love the sun. I love sunlight. And I know people say, well, why do you live in Washington?
Yeah.
Washington, the state. So I was sitting in the car one day, just sitting and enjoying the sunshine, and my partner was in the Target shopping, and I was just sitting. And those that have read the book know that I live every day with a physical disability, and so I was sitting in the handicap parking space, and there was a car to my left, and the sun was just beaming down on me. It was just so beautiful. I was kind of in this like euphoric, like meditative state almost. And my windows were cracked, getting some fresh air in, and an older white couple approached their car that was on my left in a handicapped space. And as they approached, it was a heterosexual couple. The man was driving, the woman was getting into the passenger side. And she said, well, she certainly isn't handicapped. And I like my whole like sunlight bubble was burst. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, how do you know that somebody is or is not disabled from the neck up? How
Yes.
do you know that? What did you see when you looked at me that said I don't live with a disability? I was so angry when I literally I got out of I couldn't get out of my car fast enough to get to the woman. But the man was still trying to shuffle and get in the car. And I said, thank you so much for your judgment. But I actually am someone who lives every day with a physical disability. I think he was what do you call it? He was nervous. He was like, oh, yes, thank you. Yes, thank you. And he jumped in the car, and I was just so angry. I just sat there like sobbing. And my partner came out of the Target, and the poor cart boy that was collecting all the carts was just like, should I call the police? Like, what is this woman like screaming about, you know? And I was just so like, how
dare you with
so
the
much
judgment?
happened in that moment. Yes.
Mhm.
It ruined my like I was sitting in this perfect sunlight bubble. It ruined my little bubble that I was in. I was so angry. I was just I wish I could have put that letter in the book.
Yeah, but you have to let it go because of ignorance.
Mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
one thing that I
Yes.
love about your letters at the end of pretty much every single one, you ask
Mm-hmm,
questions, questions for
mm-hmm,
people to examine themselves about
mm-hmm.
the story that you just told.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
where did
Yes.
that idea come from?
Because I didn't want people, which believe it or not, Maggie, some people still did this. I didn't want people to read this book, and my mom included. The book is designed, the letters are really short.
Mhm.
Some of them are longer, but most of them are not going to take you longer than 10 minutes to read, right? And 10 minutes is a stretch. So it was designed for you to stop at the end of that letter and kind of sit with it and interrogate it and marinate in it. And, you know, and I knew that I hope that people would do that, but I knew that some people would just move on to the next letter, right? And so I wanted those questions at the end of the letters to serve as a like stop sign. Okay, let's pause and let's take this in and let's ask ourselves these questions and wrestle with them. And so many people have said to me, you know, these questions, you know, I was getting through most of the questions, and this one question stopped me dead in my tracks. And I didn't have an answer, and it brought tears to my eyes, and I had never even thought about that. And so the questions have definitely sparked another level of conversation out and about in the community. And when I'm on the road giving workshops, the conversations have been pretty heavy around the questions.
Yeah. One of the other things that well, there were so many things. I don't know why I said just one, but I want to talk about this one in particular, where you talk about being in a store and people walking up to you, asking you, do you work there and can you help? And there'll be a whole
Yeah.
bunch of other people walking around with a little uniform on,
Oh, yes.
and
Yes.
yet they're not going to them, they're going to you because they think
Yes.
that you should be working there.
Right? I am the help somehow. I'm the help. You know, and it's happened again and again and again and again. It doesn't matter what store I'm in. It doesn't matter. And I just look back at the person like, what makes you think I work here? And I look, you know, and I've gotten to the place which is not a good place, but it's where I've gotten to. If someone says something to me like that now in a store, I just kind of stare back, and then I turn back to what I was doing. I don't even engage because I choose where I spend my energy. And
Mhm.
and Target is famous. You know, I'm like, if we all know that the Target uniform is the red shirt and the khaki pants, and I got on this bright yellow, what makes you think I work here? So it just oh, Maggie, I listen, people do that, and it's happening. And what I hate about those instances is people have no idea. People have no idea that the way that we have been socialized and trained, and not just our generation, you know, but the way
Mhm.
that we have been socialized and trained from generation to generation to generation is how we show up today.
Right.
And so when I think about the fact that when there's this phrase, and I think I say it in the book too, that my grandmother, when I talk to her, she'll say, yes, indeed. You know, and when I talk to my aunt, that's, you know, my grandmother's daughter, she'll say, yes, indeed. And when I'm talking to my mom, I'll say, yes, indeed. And I'm like, without even thinking, there was never a time in my life where my mother sat me down and said, the family's favorite phrase is yes, indeed. And this is how you say it, right? One generation listened to the generation before them, and this phrase has been passed on from generation to generation. So what white folks don't even realize, like you said, going back to what you said, is they don't even know their own history,
Mhm.
that they are the descendants. And they will, oh, I love when they say to me, but Kim, my family didn't own slaves. I did the research. I said, right. But your family grew up in the same neighborhood of the folks that did. right? And you had to change your behavior to be able to fit into a society that was willing to reject you because you were Irish, Italian, Polish, whatever you were. And then you changed your behavior and you started doing the same things that the people that did have slaves were doing so that you could fit in. And so when you come to me in a Target, even though I don't have on a red shirt or a pair of khaki pants, I don't even own khaki pants, right? And you ask me, where's the dog food, right? You are showing up as your great great grandmother who saw me as the person that should be serving her,
Right.
who saw me as the person that should be getting the dog food for her. This, so you don't even realize that that's how you're showing up, because again, nobody sat you down and said, okay, I want you to see Black people as your servants and I want you to treat them that. That's just the reality that's been passed down from generation to generation. So the behavior continues, although the reality has changed.
Yeah, it's a subliminal thing.
Yes, it's
For you,
subconscious.
it's subconscious, like, yes, indeed.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of thing.
Yes.
I loved the many different scenarios that you gave, but one of the things that continues to crop up is financial security and services. And you give an example about the first time you actually went to a bank to look about getting a home.
Yes.
Those things
Yes.
still happen.
They
And
still happen.
talk about that, because you were ready, but
I was ready. They weren't. And it's, and it was in the section of the bank that was like, they had a little waiting area that was specifically for meeting with the people back in the offices. This was not like you were waiting to make a deposit or a withdrawal or anything like that. And I was the only person there. And and the person came out, with the clipboard and was just like, Kimberlee. And I'm the only person sitting there. And I think I look like a Kimberlee. I don't know. But she's like looking beyond me, and I'm like, I'm looking where she's looking. I'm like, who does she see that's in here that's not me? So so I said, I'm Kimberlee, and her whole demeanor was like, oh, this is going to be a waste of my time. It changed, and I went in, and she just started like, rolling off the tongue with this rehearsed speech, and here, you're probably going to need about 6 months to get your credit together, and you're probably going to need about this, this and that. And I just thought to myself, you haven't pulled my credits. You don't even know that I need 6 months to get anything together. You haven't asked me what I haven't saved. You haven't asked me what my, the good faith payment I plan to put down on the house or whatever. You haven't asked me anything. You've come to sit at this table with a bucket of assumptions that I'm certain that if I looked different, you would not have made.
Exactly.
And it was just humiliating, and it was discouraging. And I walked away, and I honestly, back then when this happened, I walked away from the idea of buying a home. I walked away from that idea. And see, it wouldn't be until years later that I bought my first home.
Yeah. And see, I would have just moved on to another bank, but that's me.
Yep.
That's the way I was raised. My dad and mom used to always say, if you can't find it here, you can find it somewhere. Somebody's
I love that.
And that was their attitude. Persevere, keep on, don't accept a no for an answer, because you only need one yes.
Yes, that's right. I've learned.
And you've learned that, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, once again, we're talking with Kimberlee Williams. I'm sorry, with Kimberlee Williams. And she has this wonderful book, and it's called Dear White Woman, Please Come Home. And coming home also deals with healthcare. And you give a very poignant story about losing your dad, and what a difference that made. And I had my first guest that I had on, Kim and Kelly, was talking about how important it is to have an advocate there with you when you enter the healthcare situation, because again, people assume what you're like.
Yes.
You need.
Yes. And would Maggie, and this I have, first I have to share with you that the book is a book of 40 letters, but you have to know that though we arrived at 40 through the editing process, to begin with, there were probably closer to 100 letters.
Wow.
And so many letters had to be pulled out of the book to bring it down to 40 letters. And it was really hard to choose which ones would remain. And so, this, when talking about healthcare, I can't tell you how many, and I dare to say how this has bled into communities of color as well, that we are treated as though our stories are not true, our pain is not true, right? We are made to beg for medicine for whatever it is that we're experiencing. And we're also, our life is not valued the way that white folks are valued. And here's what I mean. When I started, and I share about this in the book, my OBGYN journey, I definitely I come from a family of women on both sides who had very complicated OBGYN stories. And so my story was complicated as well. And I share about that journey in the book. And I remember the first bump, and there were many bumps to my OBGYN journey, but I remember in that first bump, the doctor saying, maybe you should have a hysterectomy. And my world came crashing down because I was like, wait a minute, that means I'm not going to have kids. There are plenty of ways for you to have kids. I was young. Yeah. I was young. I hadn't hit that, they say at 35, your eggs are starting to, but I was in my late 20s when this happened. And, have you ever considered a hysterectomy because we need to protect you from cancer and this and, and I thought I just sat there crying because right then she was asking me to agree to, and this is before I learned about freezing your eggs and all that kind of stuff, to agree to not having another human being that sounds like me and looks like me, right? And it was just my world came crashing down. And I thought, how is that plan A? Isn't that like plan C, right? Like, how is that plan A? And so she was so quick to dismiss, like, let's just get this out of here. You don't want to deal with this. And you don't, and again, it's like you said, subliminal and subconscious, but it's real. Mm-hmm. It is real. When I talked to my friend about it, she said, look at how in her soul, she's been trained to what is the word? To prevent the continuing, right? Or the reproduction in certain classes or races of people. And she doesn't even realize it. And I'm like, there has to be another plan that we can follow before you jump to taking my lady parts out so that I don't. Yeah. So, and watching my dad go through his journey, his medical journey, was also very tough, because here's the thing: if you don't fit in the little box that the word healthy describes, you are just not treated the same. You're dismissed on so many levels. Mm-hmm. And my dad was this humongous giant. He was 6'4", 6'3". So I mean, like the beds were barely long enough for him. And so I just, again, watching,
and they're barely long enough for him. So
exactly. His hanging over. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like his foot was kind of like hanging off the bottom of the bed. Yeah. Like, yeah. So even that, like, just talking about the fact that the bed doesn't accommodate the length of your body, Mm-hmm. And so, watching that was really, really hard. Watching the lack of humanity through that process. And I always question, because I've seen humanity extended, right? Grace, mercy. And I'm watching and I'm like, I wonder how he would be treated if he were a white man, mm-hmm. if he were a white woman. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, especially given that we were at the end of life. We were watching him transition to his next place, so that was hard.
Yeah. It's any journey, so many journeys can be tough, but again, there are good people in this world who do care, mm-hmm. and mm-hmm. who do a wonderful job of taking care of so many. And a lot of
Yes.
times I feel like they're tired too. And and aren't doing
Absolutely.
and we
Absolutely.
have to put that into consideration. But at the same time, when you see kind of a pattern repeated, in particular to
Mm-hmm.
minorities, you realize that
Mm-hmm.
more than just being tired.
Yes, yes. That, you know what, that you reminded me when we first got to the state of Washington, my partner was sick. Driving through the mountains to get here was it had uh triggered her sinuses. And so we went to urgent care, and and this was back when COVID was still like, it was like the kind of the beginning, kind of, and so people were still, everyone was masked, everyone was afraid, and so she was behind a woman in line, where the lady at the desk had a whole conversation with this person, and how's your day going? And, oh, did you, is there anything else you need from me? Can I get you, if you want some water, the fountain is to the left. If you need the restroom, and then my wife steps to the window, and the person just like, name,
Well,
birthday, you know, okay, we'll call you when we're ready for you. And she came out crying, not because she was sick or because she had ear infections, but because she watched someone else be treated much
definitely.
better than she was treated.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Lack of respect. Definitely lack of
Yes.
respect.
Hmm.
We also need to talk about education because
Hmm.
that is part of your life's blood to educate others.
Hmm.
And not always when
Yes.
you arrive are they expecting to see you. It's like, did you do
Hmm.
homework? Didn't you know? Black woman coming in
Right.
ready for y'all?
Yes, yes. You are speaking the truth. I love watching that element of surprise happen. And it happens again and again and again. And you're right. Like, I come from a family of educators, and I remember, I will tell you, and I'm wondering if anyone from that school is listening. But my very first teaching job was in the southern part of Maryland, in, give me a second, St. Mary's County, Maryland. And back in the DC area, we don't say, like, I think I was a full-fledged adult before I used the word town. We was like, what county are you from? Is the language there? And I was in St. Mary's County, and I remember the first day of class at my first teaching job. One of the kids walked in, and he was a white boy, and he said to me, or he said to his friend, "Oh my God, our teacher is black." And you have to know,
Welcome to
so
America.
I was right. I was like, "Oh, this is happening on the first day." And and I taught languages. That was my thing. I still to this day love languages, and anytime I can get a chance to teach or to share, I do. And I think he expected, given that it was a Spanish class, or he might have been in my French class. I don't remember. No, he was in my Spanish class. And I think he expected someone different. He definitely did. And he told me later, I got to know the kid over time. And he told me later on, he's like, "You're my first black teacher ever." And this was an eighth grader. He had never had a black teacher. And it was just, mind. I mean, I was speechless when he told me that. And so we actually, because he said that out loud, that opened the door for me to be able to discuss race with him in a way that he had never as a child um communicated about. And so he was from a community of people that he, in his own words, were rednecks. And we got into very, very deep conversations about race and culture, and it all began with him saying, "Oh my God, our teacher is black."
Yeah, yeah. But I look at so many school systems now who are trying to ban
Mm,
books that will
yes,
educate their
yes,
children about everything, but in particular, they
yes,
lean toward minority books. They want to ban them.
yes.
And it's like, I'm not blaming you for the Civil War. I'm
Right,
not blaming
right,
you for your family having slaves. But
right,
what I
right.
am blaming you for is not allowing the whole story to be told.
Yes, 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 yes. Now you stand in the way. You're actively standing in the way. So this whole mantra or this about, oh, my family didn't own slaves, right? But now you're standing in the way of your children being taught about the folks that did own slaves. So like, and how, and not because we need to talk about, people are like, why don't you just get over slavery? Right? We don't get over the Holocaust, and we don't dare ask people to get over it, right? And so when I think about that, the fact that we can't even, we need to be able to tell history in the same way that you go to a doctor and that doctor says, does high blood pressure run in your family? Like, nobody says, why don't you get over the fact that my granddad had high blood pressure? They ask you that because if you have it, it's likely that it's somewhere in your genealogy. So, right. So we go back and we talk about the past because it helps us make sense of today. It helps us understand what's going on today. And it helps us to make the conscious decision to show up differently, to vote differently, and to write laws differently.
Right.
But if we don't go back, we can't. You don't look at that. Remember that million, what was it? Oh goodness, Million Mom March or something. The
Well, there's been the
what was
Million
it?
Man March, the
The
Million
women's
Woman March.
I
Yeah,
know, there's
yeah.
been so many. And when you look, or the women's, it was a women's march, and people were talking about
And they
how
wore the
that it
little
was
hats.
right. And
Yes, yeah.
so many people were talking about how, where were women of color in that march? And I said, listen, you got to go back to the suffrage movement when we're talking about, oh, women received the right to vote. What women?
Yeah.
What women received the right to vote,
Yeah.
right? Because we weren't given the right to vote when we, they announced the year that women were allowed to vote, right? White women were allowed to vote. And then this many years later, we were allowed to vote. And so the reason that we go back and we talk about these histories is so that we can make sense of today and we can create a different future. But if we're not even allowed to teach your kids, and here's the thing, Maggie, so many white kids have come to me right as they're graduating from high school and said, Kim, the only person in my life that has talked to me about these things is you. How is it that I'm 18 years old and I've never had these conversations? How is it that I'm 18 and I didn't know, I never learned about this and never learned about that? And the kids want to know.
Mm-hmm.
It's their parents that are, I don't know what they're afraid of, Maggie. I mean, that they're banning. I mean, I never imagined I'd live in a time where books were banned. I never imagined. It's heartbreaking.
It really is. And, some hate is something that is taught.
Mm-hmm.
We're not born hating.
Mm-hmm.
We're not
Yes.
feeling superior. That's something that's taught. And that's one of the things that you bring out in your book, Dear White Woman, Please Come Home, because there are journeys that we all walk. When I look at myself first as a woman who also is Black. But I'm much more woman and have those issues to deal with than I am being a Black woman. And it's always there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's always there. It's always there. Yeah. And I love what you just touched on, that hate, we don't come to this world this way. We are taught. And here's the thing, as a teacher, I will swear, as an educator, I will swear by it. The quickest and fastest learners are young children. Like when I teach, I have taught, Maggie, in my years of teaching language, I have taught everyone from kindergarten and pre.
Too.
I do. I'm a linguist at heart. That's my joy. That's my love. And I've taught everybody from pre-K to college age kids, and the ones that are quickest at grasping it are the younger ones. So it shows you how quickly they're able to soak in something without question, without interrogation, right? And I met this little boy in a park in Maryland, and I am an empath through and through. I love all living things. I'm an animal lover. And he had a little dog, and the dog was coming towards me, and I bent down to start to pet it. And he put his hand, I mean, this little boy has to be at the oldest 3. And he put his little hand out and he said, stop. He doesn't like Black people. Maggie, what? 3-year-olds don't talk like that. 3-year-olds. And here's the thing. And people say, oh, his parents had to tell him that. No. In his 3-year-old mind, and children of that age will tell the truth, the unfiltered truth all the time, whether you are ready or not. What he was saying in his vocabulary, or the limited vocabulary, that he had, right? When you're that age on the playground, I don't like you, you don't like me, we don't like you, you're not my friend, I'm not your. And what he was saying was, our dog doesn't hang out with people that look like you. And
Yeah.
I know that this world calls you black. He said, no black person's ever been around this dog. That's what he was saying. And so he says, like you can't be a friend of my dog because you're black.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, you weren't born that way, my friend.
Yeah.
That is learned behavior. That's
Mhm.
learned behavior.
Yeah, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like public transportation
Mm-hmm.
either, huh?
Oh no, Lord, Maggie, no.
And
I
I used
am
to ride the train back and
claustrophobic
forth all the time to
and
work. So.
through. And it's gotten worse as I've gotten older. I am claustrophobic and I am empath through and through. So the energy of one person sitting next to me becomes my energy. And it is like, I will get to a place where I feel like I'm drowning in it, or suffocating is a better way to say it. I literally have a physiological response to the energy of other people. And it's a blessing and a curse, because I mean, it helps me to do the work that I do so much easier. But at the same time, it can be very, very suffocating. And it demands that I am more private with or more strict about boundaries and my private time, because I'm such an energy sponge. So I don't I mean, I used to get on the train and it would overwhelm me so bad I'd be crying um because of the energy that I could feel, right? And in the morning, that rush to work is like, folks are feeling anxious, folks are feeling like the train is not on time, so they're late getting to the, also all this emotion in the train. It's hot and people are like, people are missing. It was just, woo, oh Maggie, it was tough for me. It was tough for me as an empath.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, Kimberlee, the book is fabulous. It makes people think. And I have to share one, we were just talking about things being taught. My freshman
Yes.
year in college, I went to the University of Kansas, moved into Oliver Hall,
Hmm.
brand new dorm. I got there first.
Hmm.
My roommate arrived second. She was a woman named Marion Jane Lippincott. Um, and her mother looked at me, and you could see that there was going to be a problem. Not from Marion,
Uh-huh.
not at all,
Hmm.
but from her
Hmm.
mama,
Hmm.
to the point where
Hmm.
at the end of that semester, she was gone. We got along fine.
Wow.
No problems, no issues,
Hmm.
anything like that.
Mm.
But I could tell from her mother that her mother had an issue of
Hmm.
her daughter rooming with somebody black. I don't know what she thought I was
Hmm.
going to do to her. But
Right.
again,
Right.
but Marion and I, even as she moved to a different dorm and things like that, we really kept up with each other for a while.
Wow.
Eventually
Hmm.
leaving town, her getting married, things like that. But it made me realize, and that was one of those real slap in the face sort of things. Now, a
Hmm.
lot of people loved me not having a roommate, because if they had friends coming in from out of town, there was a bed for them to go to. So that
Uh-huh.
worked out
Uh-huh.
well. And I got to meet a lot of other people. But again, the hangups that the parents have, and parents need to really watch what they're doing, don't they?
Oh, Maggie, you just hit a gold mine, because children, and I'm talking about all ages, do not do what you say, they do what you do. And so you're taking me back to a moment, and this story is not in the book, at PetSmart. And a little girl was just so excited. She was the employee was grabbing a new lizard out for her and putting it in a box, and she was going to take her new lizard home. And she was so excited, Maggie. Like her joy was just spilling over about this lizard. And we were approaching, and she turned, and I don't know who she expected to be there, but she turned and she's talking about the lizard as if we knew what was going on. And I just engaged in conversation with her. Really, and then she's like, yeah, my old lizard died. I said, well, and what are you going to name this lizard? And she says, well, we have to find out if it's a boy or girl first. I mean, we had this whole conversation about this lizard, and her mom was standing there waiting. And in the cart, she had an infant in a carrier. And then the little girl, and at one point you watch like slow motion, Maggie, you watch the little girl pause and look up to her mother for direction. Like, is it okay for me to have this conversation? And I saw the interaction. So I interacted with mom by saying, "What a beautiful baby you have." Mom said nothing, did not respond. And she looked down at her daughter with this stern look, but it was complete silence. And she looked away. And just like that, the little girl, like a switch on a wall, shut down, and she stopped engaging with me. And just like that, and I walked away and I was in tears. And I said to my wife, I said, in that moment, just like the story in the book at the zoo, in that moment, her mom taught her how to see me and how to interact with me. And if you sat down with that mom today, I mean, I don't know who she is, or I don't know how to get in touch with her, but if you sat down with that mom today and asked her, have you taught your daughter racism? She'd probably start crying and say, no, what? No, our family, we love all people. We love, yeah, no, I would never. And they might even go as far to say this, Maggie, I would have done that if that were a white family that was talking to my daughter. And here's the difference. There are so many white folks in your life that your daughter doesn't need a special interaction at PetSmart to know how to treat them. But, and there's no history of you looking down on other people that look like you. But in that moment, you taught your daughter by not speaking to me, not acknowledging me. She wouldn't even look at me. I don't know if she thought I wanted to kidnap the infant in the car. I don't know what she thought. But I mean, and she would not, and she shut her daughter down with one facial expression, and her daughter stopped engaging with me. And the next time that her daughter runs into a Black woman in the store, she certainly will not speak to her. She certainly will. And that little girl, Maggie, she couldn't have been older than 5. She was very young.
Yeah. There's one other story you talk about, because again, growing up the way I did and being around many white people, and like I said, very, very, very close friends, the kind of, I once said to my friends, I said, thank you for letting me stay at your house, even when you're not here, and knowing that everything's going to still be there. And that, I said that to both Black and white friends, because that's how you realize who your real friends are, and they value. But you talk about this situation when the tables are turned and it's a predominantly Black crowd and only a few white people. And you talked about a party that you gave, your 16th birthday party, I think it was. And all
my
that
sweet
had
16, yes.
Class and stuff like that came, and all of a sudden stomach-ache had to go, because she got there and she realized she was a minority. And there's an uncomfortableness that real friends don't have, but the kind of in-betweeners do.
Yeah, oh, 100%. When you're the only fill in the blank in the room, you feel that. It causes a physiological response in your body. But like you said, if you and I are at the level the level of authenticity and depth that I think our relationship is or should be, you listen, hey, I'm gonna be the only, guess what? I'm gonna be the only white girl in here, and I'm being there getting it with them, just like, yep, 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 because I'm here to celebrate your birthday. I'm here to celebrate you. And it doesn't matter what I feel uncomfortable about, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But that stomach ache was a strong one, and not, and I hate, what I hate the most about what happened was that it proved the kids of color correct at the party. They assumed, right? And then she left, and they're like, yeah, we knew she wasn't going to stay. And I'm like, I was rooting for her, and I was hoping that they would see something different. And of course, their assumption was proven correct.
Right. Well, Kimberlee, I'm going to say thank you for writing this wonderful book that is thought-provoking. And that's really what you wanted more than anything. But what would you like to leave people with more than anything?
More than anything, I'd leave people with centering humanity, because when you can see that person of color sitting next to you on the train or in the elevator with you, or when you can see them as your mother or your child, or even Maggie, I saw something online about that said, do white folks know that the dogs in Flint, Michigan are drinking drinking the water too? We, because of how, the stereotype about how well they treat their dogs. Listen, when you see me as a human being, your behavior and our interaction and our relationship has to go deeper. It has to. And it's not as scary as you think. If you just come to the table and I come to the table, the two of us together, oh, we are so much stronger, so much more powerful together. And when we get there, it's a beautiful place. There might be some bumps in the road, but it's a beautiful place, because the most important thing throughout those bumps, throughout life, is that you and I remain in relationship. And I mean authentic relationship with one another. And that is indeed possible. I can speak from experience. I hear Maggie speaking from her own experience. It is indeed possible. Not only possible, but beautiful, and it's happening every day. And so I hope to see you on the other side of that book or audiobook, creating these relationships together.
Oh, that's it. Once again, it's Kimberlee Yolanda Williams, and her book is Dear White Woman, Please Come Home. Hand me your bias and I'll show you our connection. But just remember, Dear White Woman, please come home. Listen, thank you, Kimberlee. I wish you continued blessings and success. And also, if you need to know more, then you need to go to her website, which is engagingacrossdifference.com. That's engagingacrossdifference.com. Book can be found pretty much everywhere now, huh?
Yes, yes.
Go get it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, listen, folks, thanks for joining us today. And once again, continue to seek peace and spread lots of love. I'm Maggie Linton.